Epiphany services, which is why we have kept the star up for so long. This is the season when we acknowledge, often symbolically, that we are guided by the light. You know, some of us are very uncomfortable when someone tells us that they love us. I'm not talking about an honest affirmation, but about let's say a critic who we know has said nothing good about us behind our backs, but who in public claims their affection for us because that is what Christians do. They love one another. Thanks just the same, but I'd rather be despised. Most of us will have a difficult time loving some people who will cross our paths. If we are honest, we'd admit that we would be just as happy if they dropped off the face of the earth. Will Rogers was a man who claimed that he had never met a man he didn't like. But the rest of us know that somewhere along the line we have run into folk we flat out detest, if we are honest. But in plain talk, rough talk, hard to listen to talk, we're going to hear Jesus' most difficult teaching. But it defines the core of Christian values around loving our enemies. But first, let us center ourselves with one verse from number 96. Will you come into the light? The diffused light of a sunrise, a sign, Christ's hopeful light ending the darkness. The light beam from a lighthouse, a sign, Christ's light of security in a fast-changing world. The clear light from a flashlight, a sign, Christ revealing light, exposing the ways of self-centeredness. The gentle light of a candle, a sign, Christ, the light of the world for his time and for our time and for all time beyond. Let us sing of that love in Love Divines, All Love Excelling, number 333. Creator, Word, and Spirit one, help us to relax. Take from us the tension that makes peace of mind impossible. Take from us the fears that do not allow us to believe that peace is possible. Take from us the worries that blind our sight to the goodness in others. Take from us the distress that hides our joy in life, even the small slivers of joy. Make now our time together an opportunity to know who we are as individuals and as the body of Christ. That we are in your care, held in your love, that we are one in spirit and purpose. Bless our hearing and pondering as we begin with adding in song the words that have been passed on to us. If anyone asked us if we were good Christians, we'd likely respond with a yes, or perhaps more humbly admit, I try. But then they'd say to us, well then, give me all the money in your bank account. And we might stammer a little bit, but finally say, sorry, but no. And they'd say, you're a hypocrite. Jesus says to give to everyone who asks of you. This person is likely right. We claim to believe, to follow Jesus, and yet we consistently fail to live up to what he commanded us to do. So what are we to do with this type of insanely perfectionistic and frankly impossible demands? Let's listen to what Jesus has to say from Luke 6, verses 27 through 38. To you who are ready for the truth, I say this: love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the subtle moves of prayer for that person. If someone slaps you in the face, stand there and take it. If someone grabs your shirt, gift wrap your best coat and make a present of it. If someone takes unfair advantage of you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more payback. Live generously. Here is a simple truth of thumb for behavior. Ask yourself what you want people to do for you, then grab the initiative and do it for them. If you only love the lovable, do you expect a pat on the back? Run-of-the-mill sinners do that. If you only help those who help you, do you expect a medal? Garden variety sinners do that. If you only give for what you hope to get out of it, do you think that's charity? The stingiest of pawnbrokers do that. I tell you, love your enemies. Help and give without expecting in return. You'll never, I promise, regret it. Live out this God-created identity the way our Father lives towards us, generously and graciously, even when we're at our worst. Our Father is kind. You be kind. Don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want the same treatment. Don't condemn those who are down. That hardness can boomerang. Be busy, easy on people. You'll find life a lot easier. Give away your life. You'll find life given back, but not merely given back with bonus and blessing. Giving, not getting, is the way. Generosity begets generosity. And now, in these sacred words of old, may we hear the Spirit speaking anew. It's a radical idea, loving our enemies. We see this very plainly in the favorite Sunday school story from Genesis about Joseph and his brothers. Even long before they actually planned to kill him, they hated their brother. It had been building, and we can almost empathize with them. Because Joseph was primarily a spoiled brat, daddy's favorite. They had to work, but Joseph just stayed around the house. Joseph, at the time, was the lowest man on the totem pole. Benjamin was born later. But he got to wear the special coat given to him by his father. Every time his older brothers got a glimpse of it, it felt like their noses were being rubbed in his undeserved and non-traditional top spot in the family. And on top of all that, Joseph had dreams. Dreams which he delighted in retelling. Dreams about how the rest of the family, even the rest of the universe, would bow down to him. So the resentment of his brothers built up until the day came when it was too much. They hated him, and now they needed to get rid of him. He was no longer seen as the beloved brother, but the enemy. So using their imaginations, they considered ways to deal with him, but they finally decided that instead of killing him, they'd sell him into slavery. So Joseph ended up in Egypt, and the brothers thought that they were done of him. But Joseph's journey was just beginning. Bought by a high official, Joseph worked for him until the day the official's wife tried to seduce him. And when he refused to give in, she cried rape, and Joseph was thrown into prison. And he was there that he languished for 2 years before he was brought up forth by the Pharaoh to interpret some dreams. And because of Joseph's wisdom and discernment given to him by God, he was suddenly and unexpectedly freed from prison and raised to the second highest office in all of Egypt, second only to the Pharaoh. Something else that would have made his brothers hate him even more had they known. Anyway, for 7 years, Joseph oversaw a great public works project, which would set aside a portion of each year's harvest so that when the 7 years famine came, Egypt would be ready. Life was good for Joseph, even 2 years into the famine. But one day his brothers came to Egypt to buy grain, and he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. So the challenge for him was what to do. Certainly, he instantly remembered all that they had done to him, all the suffering he had endured, and for so long. No doubt he had certain feelings about all this, but now they were totally under his control. He could do what he wanted with them. He could exact revenge for so many years of suffering, all of it unjust suffering. What would he do? What would we do? Well, what Joseph did was toy with them for a while. He made their lives chaotic and traumatic. First, he held one of them as a hostage until they returned with their youngest brother, Benjamin. He played mind games with them by placing their money in sacks of grain, causing them to wonder. Then when they did return, he accused them of being spies and threatened to keep the youngest brother. They were terrified, and rightly so. They were at his mercy. And this is where we join the story today. Was Joseph able to love his enemies? Yes, he was. And the reality is simply amazing. The brothers, realizing who he was and realizing that he intended to do them no harm at all, were actually in shock. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't believe it. So Joseph called them close and embraced them. Thoughts of fears of revenge were broken as a family once torn apart is now restored with joy. Love your enemies, Jesus said. Do good to those who hate you. These words are as radical now as they were then. How can a sensible person love someone who hurts them? How can we love someone who gossips about us, who cheats us, who uses us, or coldly ignores us? How can we love an enemy when everything we feel inside about that person makes us want to hurt them as they hurt us? Perhaps we can talk about love once the playing field is leveled, once we've exacted our sweet revenge. We might talk about love when the scales of justice are in balance once again, but love our enemies before revenge? Love our enemies without the expectation for revenge? Love someone without any thought of getting even? That is what Jesus is talking about here. And the reason is simple. Revenge doesn't work. The scales of justice can never be exactly balanced. As Martin Luther King Jr. said when people were calling for revenge after his house was burned down, when you live by the rule, an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, you end up with a nation of blind and toothless people. So Jesus tells us to love our enemies. Do good to those who hate us. But how in the world do we do that? How do you love someone for whom you feel no love? Before doing the counterintuitive act of loving an enemy, you have to do something else that goes against the norm. You have to recognize that love has little to do with feelings. Our culture is one that believes everything is based on feelings, but that isn't true. Love doesn't depend on how we feel. A woman tells a story about her first love affair. She had gone out on a date with an attractive young man. It was one of the first dates she'd ever gone on, and she felt sure by the time the dinner was over that she was deeply in love with him. After the meal, as she sat listening to him and gazing into his eyes, she felt more and more lightheaded. She said that when she looked around him, the whole world looked different, that it kind of faded out, that nothing seemed to her to be as vivid as the young man's smiling face, and nothing quite so clear as his calm, strong voice. He filled my eyes, she said. He was the only thing I could think about, the only reality that I could connect with. When asked what happened after that, she said, I was taken to the hospital and I had my stomach pumped. The doctor told me I had a case of food poisoning. You can't tell if you love someone simply by the way you happen to feel at the moment about that person. Our feelings change. They come and go. We can feel the same feeling in different contexts. So feelings are completely unreliable when it comes to evaluating or acting on love. Think about your relationship with your closest family members. For anyone who is married, can you honestly say that you always like your spouse? that you always feel good about him or her, that you always want your spouse to be close to you? Do you always feel a tremendous fondness for a brother or sister, and that you've never had the feeling that they annoy the stuffing out of you? Of course not. When we stop to think about it, we know that love cannot be based on our feelings. Our commitment, a commitment rooted in and shaped by love, cannot depend on how we feel at any given moment. Love must be based on something else. It must be measured by something more substantial. And that something else is action. Love is known as a verb, and it's a verb in action. Christ makes that perfectly clear. He tells us what love does. Love blesses rather than curses. It is merciful as God is merciful. It forgives as God forgives, without any expectation of reward or vengeance. And then God says, do to others as you would have them do to you. It is the great rule of love, the great rule by which you can tell if you are loving someone even when you don't feel like it. So how can we love someone who is unlovable? Well, we must first resist the temptation of our culture and stop believing its lie that love is only a feeling. Feelings are unreliable. And then we must act. The proof, the evidence of our love is known in the way we behave towards one another. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the great rule of love. It's the rule that begins with do. The spiritual promise that comes with obedience to this rule is the judgment you give is the judgment you will receive. What you sow, you will reap. Give it, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be given to you. It's a promise rooted in relationships. We don't forgive because we are altruistic. We don't bless because we are such good people. We forgive because we know we need forgiveness. We bless because we know we need blessings. And we show mercy because we know that we would be lost unless abundant mercy is shown to us. We do to others as we would want them to do unto us because there's no other way to break the cycle of evil. Love is the only act that can overcome hate. Blessing is the only act that can overcome cursing. Forgiveness is the only act that can ultimately right a wrong. Joseph seemed to get this long ago. He forgave, he blessed, he loved. But Genesis would not have us hold Joseph up as a hero. He would not wish to be known so. For what he says, what the story tells us, is that God has been at work in all that happened, from the first betrayal of Joseph to the healing between the brothers at the end. God's the one who's acting. Joseph was obedient, and in his behavior, Joseph is godlike. He was rejected by his own people. He was treated and suffered unjustly. Nevertheless, God forgave, God blessed, God loved. And when we obey, when we trust God's way with us, we too become signs of the kingdom right now. We become godlike. We become Christ-like. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes loving, forgiving, and blessing hurts. But there's no other way. And so we love, not because we want to do others a favor. We love because we've been loved. We love because we've been transformed. And for that good news, thanks be to God. In the dictionary, an enemy is defined as one who feels hatred towards, intends injury to, or opposes the interests of another, a foe. I wonder how true that actually is. Or do we label people enemies without truly knowing them, who they are, what concerns or intentions they have? Do they feel threatened by something we've done and are only responding out of a self-preservation instinct? If we stood back and looked at our enemies more closely, what can we learn about them and about ourselves that could bring us closer? Let's consider this in a prayer of confession. It seems impossible to love our enemies, God. They have hurt and humiliated us. But you show us that revenge does not work out. It seems impossible to love our enemies, God. They have taken advantage and laugh at us. But you show us that we have to see their point of view. It seems impossible to love our enemies, God. They undermine our self-confidence. But you show us that peace can be shared between us. It seems impossible to love our enemies, God. They expose our failings and shortcomings. In Jesus, we have been shown that with love, nothing is impossible. Thanks be to God. You may not always sing along with the hymns, but please think on these words that we are going to say and what they are asking of us. Do our gifts represent the way in which God has blessed us? Do our gifts represent our gratitude for all that God has given us? Do our gifts represent our desire to help do God's work in the world? God, Jesus taught us that where our treasure is, there will our hearts be also. In this hour, we come bringing our treasures, all that we have and all that we are. We come seeking our treasure that does not fade, decay, or disappoint. Share with us the treasure of heaven, that we may bodily share it with others. Amen. Just a couple of announcements. Perhaps by the time you are watching this, we have already had our board meeting, which was planned for Sunday morning at 10:30. Some decisions need to be made about when we want to come back to this building, when we want to open the doors and let the Spirit come back in along with ourselves. The other announcement is we're going to have a knit and natter, little get together, a little social gathering. Next Wednesday afternoon from 1:30 to perhaps 3:30, there'll be refreshments. You want to bring the current knitting or crocheting project you're working on, perhaps maybe one you've already completed that you particularly are proud of, and that you are really, that's good to feel like that sometimes. Sometimes there's a lot of work going into those projects. Or you might want to bring a pattern that you really is quite a favorite, and we could share it with each other. You need to be double vaxxed, and a booster would be nice, but double vaxxed is really good. So please come, and if you want to invite a friend, yes, come along. I had difficulty writing this prayer. I kept thinking about my enemies, but always having it in the back of my mind that I may be an enemy in someone else's mind. We never know what we have done or said to anger someone who hasn't or can't forgive us. So maybe we're both praying for each other this morning. I wonder if that cancels out each other's prayers. But I also have difficulty even thinking of people as my enemies. We were talking about this as we were recording the music on Wednesday, and Ian suggested that perhaps the phrase, "not my favorite person," might be more aligned with what I'm meaning. And I agree. So that is what I'm going to run with today in our prayer. Jesus, you have been called the Prince of Peace. So can you please install that peace in our lives? Peace in our minds and hearts. Disturbed by what is happening around us, whether it's in our families, our community, the country, the world. Those with views that we question as irrational and who have endangered our health and wellness. Those who always claim to be right and will do anything to control others through oppressive measures. Those who are just plain nasty and vindictive, so are among those who are not our favorite people. Help us to work past wanting to label people as our enemies when we know nothing of their struggles, past, present, or what they are facing in the future that might have made them the way they are, often unapproachable, unlovable, unreasonable. And God, help that we may not be like them, but we never know how others see us. May we only judge others when we are perfect, totally lovable, thoughtful, realistic, generous, kind, compassionate, always putting others first. It's our hope that we will be this type of person. May your Spirit push us in our attempts. And let it tenderize our hearts when they have become hardened. We keep in our thoughts those who are recovering from surgery or facing it, those whose bodies are betraying them, those struggling with worries that drag their spirits down, those who harbor anger, resentment, pain, and don't know how to deal with it. And especially Randy and his sons, Jeremy and Joshua, and their families on Anne's passing. May their memories of her as a wife, mother, and grandmother be strong and lasting as they are held in a special place set aside in their hearts, and ours as we remember her place in the community. Bless us all in our working to look for the divine in each person we meet, seeking slivers of goodness to celebrate. May our choices keep us and those we love safe and healthy. So be these things. This last hymn is likely not one we know, but one that's very relevant as we sit in the middle of winter. It's from More Voices 71, When the Wind of Winter Blows. Let us go now, working to turn grudges held into grace, fractures into forgiveness, and hardness into hearts broken open by love.